Hello everyone, welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. I will be speaking about a film called, or otherwise titled, Night in Paradise. It was released in 2020 based off of IMDb's notes, and it is categorized under crime and genre. This movie's runtime is 131 minutes, and it is a South Korean film. I did want to note, just because I found it interesting, not really because it matters, I guess, that the ratings for this film, hold on, I thought they were interesting. The ratings for this film from IndieWire was a 2.5 out of 5. For IMDb, it was a 6.7 out of 10, and then Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 73%. Overall, for Google users, it's set at 89% likes for this film. I was Googling it for images and things that I might put into my video, and I saw that, and I was like, that's interesting. I don't really speak much about critics' opinions of films, but I do wonder a lot of the time what critics really based their viewing experience on to give a certain score. So like, what really made them give it a higher score? What really made them give it a medium or lower score? Because yeah, sure, you can like do a summary and an overview and then basically of what a score, that's what a score is for, or like a star rating is for. But what really nailed down that number? Because there's always something, there's always a scene or two, whether it's a shot or a back-to-back shot reversal scene, an aerial shot, a piece of dialogue, an actor. There's always something that really pinpoints it, and I'm just always curious about what they were thinking and what made them give that final number. But that's a tangent. I haven't even started talking about the film. I just thought that was interesting and something that you should know later when you're thinking about watching this film, or when you're watching this film, because you should watch this film. So Night in Paradise is what I would probably describe as like a gangster or like mobster film. I'm using the word mobster, loosely. I don't really know what they would define this as in Korea, in that region. I'm from America, and I don't know much about gang affiliation, but it exists obviously, and I'm sure it exists all around the world. Movie depictions and film depictions of what this looks like globally obviously aren't always going to be the most accurate because they're films and they can be dramatized, but I don't know really how they refer to themselves as. But because IMDb specifically sort of summarizes this film very quickly and uses the terminology mobster, that's what I'm going to use. So the main character that we follow along for practically the entire film until we're introduced to a second character who sort of takes over when this other character disperses, or I guess you'll find out soon what happens to them. But our main character's name is Tae-goo. And again, I am going to actually apologize if I say any names incorrectly. I did try to go over these a few weeks ahead of time. I've watched this film twice so far. Sometimes I will do commentary reviews right after I watch a film. Other times I kind of need to take it all in. This film had a lot. The pacing of the film specifically was really good for like a 2 hour and something minute runtime, which isn't unusual for a film, but it was a little over 2 hours, and usually films will be stuck at the like 160, 150, or like right at 2 minutes, so practically 2 minutes. This film was a little longer, but it didn't feel like that. The pacing was really good. In that it didn't ever feel boring, and they really kept up the storyline and kept you, I wouldn't say guessing, because sometimes I did guess what was going to happen before it did, but they definitely didn't leave you bored, and they kept the pace. They had just enough humor, which it needed, honestly, because it gets heavy, and real life experiences, down-to-earth, face-to-face dialogue, but also a lot of action, and it does get very graphic and violent, so I want to preface that and make that very clear. If you're gonna watch this, it's gonna get messy, very messy. But I kind of like that about the film. I say kind of, but I mean a lot. It just makes it good. But I can understand if you're not a fan of gory films or you just can't take the violence. I can only take stuff like that, obviously, in film. Any other time I see blood or have to think about like needles or anything like that, I fucking feel like I'm gonna pass out. So yeah, from a theatrical standpoint and an entertainment standpoint, and knowing that this is all on screen, it's a different idea for me. But obviously some people can't think of it that way and it's too much, so I just want to sort of explain that it does get really graphic. So think about that before you watch it. I would say watch the trailer, but sometimes the trailer gives a little too much in the film, and although that's not my fault, and the whole point of a trailer is to give someone a preview to figure out if they, want to consider watching the entire film, I don't want to suggest that if you actually want to be surprised by the film. I don't think I've actually seen the trailer for this film, so maybe they don't give a lot away, but because nowadays trailers are not done so well, I don't want to say that if you don't want spoilers. However, if you don't want spoilers, please do not listen to my podcast commentary episodes before watching a film. I will give away spoilers. It gets a little exhausting having to repeat myself about that all the time, but I feel like it's something I should say since I do talk about movies, and people sometimes may think that they're going to get a light review. Sometimes I do a lighter review, sometimes I don't, but I wouldn't listen to this podcast fully until you've watched the film. And then you can compare and have your own discussion with yourself or your family, whatever you do. Okay, so Tae-goo, our main character, is a mobster. He has like a group of guys and he works for, I guess you could consider them like their leader. And in this case, I think that their leader is Yang Do-soo at the time. Or at least they're in alliance with them. There's a lot of situations where there's like different leaders, different turfs, different like minions, I like to call them, but essentially they're just like guys who go around doing the dirty work for these top men who have a lot of access and a lot of power, and they're all very greedy and very selfish. When I'm specifically talking about like leaders like Yang Do-soo and director Ma, who comes back in, and like CEO Hwang and Chairman Do, so stuff like that. Kudo, all those guys seem to be very greedy and power hungry, and for some reason they're going through this battle of wanting to sort of recruit Tae-goo, the guy who he currently does work for, or is his leader, whatever you want to call it, whatever the specifics are, I don't know, is getting shook because he knows that the guy that does a lot of his dirty work or works for him or has loyalty to him for whatever reason is being recruited by other people who know that he's good and also just want to branch up their power tactics. And so we get the first scene with Tae-goo pretty much, I want to say they're having a discussion, but it feels sort of like there's a lot of tension and threats being thrown around subtly. When someone's like throwing you words in a discussion, but they feel like blades, right? It doesn't feel like you're coming to a discussion or you're coming to an agreement or you're going to do some legit business deal. It felt very much like they were having an argument without actually yelling. And that's sort of solidified in the fact that Tae-goo, when he leaves the room and he enters into like what seems like some little janky casino from whatever meeting room they were originally in, that he's pissed. He even looks back and the camera sort of holds on him and he just looks pissed, like, what the fuck am I doing here? This guy's an ass. Who does he think he is? And essentially the whole meeting was that leader, I don't remember his name. There's so many of them in this film. I'm probably going to hone in on Director Ma and the other guy. But yeah. Anyway, he tries to recruit our main character, and he fails. Essentially, that's what it feels like, because Tae-goo's pretty much like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna work for you. Whatever. So he leaves. And then we get a little bit of Tae-goo's personal life. I believe they're at the airport, and he's picking up his older sister, his Nuna, and his niece. They seem to either come back from a trip or they're visiting him. You know, it's very quick. Again, the pacing is really spot on, and it's not boring. And so he says hi, and his sister's sort of, you know, badgering him for being a mobster and talking about how dangerous it is and why do you look so tired and things like that. And she's saying it pretty loudly in the airport, and he's kind of flustered. He's like, hey, you're gonna like give my job description away to everyone here, and it's really not one of those job descriptions I need you to be talking about in public. And then the niece, you know, she's very young. The sister is, I think, older than her brother, and then the niece is like a child, like her kid, and his niece. And he's super happy because I think it's her birthday or something like that, and he got her a gift, something that involves him getting her a gift, and he's just super happy to see her. And there's like a softer side to him, obviously, around his family, which I guess I shouldn't say obviously, because not everyone's like that around their family, but he is specifically, and it's a different side to him, especially since we've only seen sort of this hard-boiled, tough exterior, even if it was just for a few minutes in a discussion with this other guy. And he, and one of his like men who follow him, yes, he has a group of guys who also follow him, but I don't know that he's like the top leader or anything, but they trust him and there's loyalty there. And he goes to like his car, he has his own car or whatever, and his sister and his niece get in. He's excited again because he wants to watch his niece open her gift, and the sister's like, can you move, I need to get in. And they're, you know, being playful and being family. And there's another cute moment where he and his, you know, one of the guys are waving like really cute at the niece, and she's like waving at them through the window as the car drives off, and that's a very cute moment, again, a little humorous moment. That's really needed in this film, and it works very well. It doesn't feel corny, it doesn't feel misplaced, it's good. And so from there, we see him sort of break that exterior or that piece of himself, and the other guy also follows suit. You know, the waving is done now, and they're all serious again. And Tae-goo pretty much tells them, like, nah, I need to go check something about my sister. You can go ahead without me, I'll be fine. And of course, the guy doesn't want to leave him alone, but he does. And Tae-goo goes up and speaks to some doctor about some illness that's going on with his sister. And anyway, the sister needs a donor, and he's not a match, even though their brother and sister, they're real siblings, but they have, I think, different fathers. And so he's just not a match for her. And it doesn't really, well, I don't remember if it does or not, but I don't remember it explaining why she needs a donor or what she like needs a donor for. I don't know, but anyway, he asks like how long she's gonna be alive, and it's not very long. And so we get this really sad shot of him in, I think, the hospital like waiting room or something, and he's just sitting there very somber about the fact that his sister's probably gonna die soon, and probably thinking about what he's gonna have to take on from there. And his sister actually calls him. Oh, okay, so I do want to say that I feel like this story or this film gives a lot of foreshadowing and very subtle, sophisticated methods. When they were waving off to the younger niece when the car was driving by, it held it for very long, and I felt like that was a sign that something bad was going to happen. You know, when like they give the character a long exit, it feels like the story is teaching you, like the film is teaching you how to read it. And that other moment I explained where they close up or they pause on him staring back at the guy after they had that intense meeting, it again feels like the story is not only foreshadowing when it gives you those long exit pauses, but It's almost clear that it is. And every film teaches you how to read it from the moment you start watching. It's style, it's aesthetic, it's cinematography, it's dialogue. You know what you're getting yourself into beyond just what it's listed as its drama or anything like that. And you're learning to read it, and then maybe midway, sometimes if it's good, very good, you'll read it right away. Yeah, I mean, even when you watch a horror film and they're like jump scares, it's teaching you already what type of film this is going to be versus other horror films. And it's interesting how it does that, but okay, back to the point. He's in the hospital waiting room, and his sister calls, and she's like asking him about what he wants to eat, something like in that regard. And he pretty much just says, oh, it's fine. And since he was thinking about her already and then she's calling him, it feels very much like overkill, and that I knew at that point that something bad was going to happen, because we had already gotten a scene with him. We had already got him talking about her for over 10 minutes. Now she's calling him. It's something bad's going to happen, and something bad does happen. During their conversation, the phone sort of cuts off, and he's like asking, he's like, Nuna, like, sister, what's up, you know, hello, can you hear me? And the phone cuts off, and then we get this cut, and then we see a scene of a street, and the car that the sister and the niece were in is flipped over, and they close up on the gift that the young niece got from Tae-goo, and they're dead. We don't actually see their bodies, but they're dead, and then we later see a funeral scene of Tae-goo staring sort of at their picture with the white flowers surrounded by it. They died. So, fucking sad. Yeah, what a way to start a film. So from this point, Tae-goo is obviously a lot more upset and angry than he might appear to be, but he feels very much like a stone. Like, he's obviously grieving and upset and angry. I don't know at this point what he's thinking, but I'm sure that he's wondering, like, what's up. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it wasn't, but it seems like his profession has finally crossed over into that line where they start messing with family, and they did. Well, at least that's what the film tells us or wants us to assume at this point. And that's when walks in this guy that the first viewing, obviously I didn't know what he was about. I just knew that he was sort of like an alliance or the leader of Tae-goo, because Tae-goo has a lot of respect and he speaks to him very professionally, whatever. And his name is Yang-do-soo. And the first viewing of this and the second viewing are totally different, because the second viewing, this guy is very much a villain. The first viewing, I felt like something was off, but I didn't know. So you'll see why soon. Yang-do-soo walks in, and, you know, he's like, oh, you know, I'm sorry what happened to your family. We're gonna settle the score. It's pretty much essentially saying that this was no accident. This was very intentional, and someone targeted your family and succeeded by killing them. And Tae-goo just seems to take his word for it and believes it. And this is when this little rivalry sorry, between whatever was essentially just tension before is starting to cut through. And I don't know if they do this essentially, but I guess they do, because Tae-goo is a part of it. As much as he is a likable character, let's not get it twisted. He's not the best person based off of his profession, but in this case, he is getting revenge for his family, so that's sort of an anti-hero trope. One that makes a lot of sense, but still could be seen as problematic. Anyway, Tae-goo goes and plans with Yang-do-soo, and whoever they assume took the hit or made the call to kill Tae-goo's family, this guy is now targeted. This is the same guy that Tae-goo spoke to in the very beginning of the film when there was a lot of tension, and now Tae-goo is out for blood. So they meet again at this like fucking sauna place. It looks like a sauna or like a bathhouse. And they're all like naked talking in this steam house. This guy, the leader that he's speaking to, his men are really on high alert because they don't trust him. They don't trust Tae-goo. And Tae-goo's very stone cold, still grieving, sad, pretty much listening to what this the leader is saying, but not really taking it in. He just seems like he's a ghost, like he's just there for shits and giggles, for this guy's shits and giggles, but he's really gonna like fuck him up, and he does. He says he needs like some cold water to just, you know, freshen up a bit. So he leaves the little steaming room and he goes somewhere where there's like a pool or cold water or something like that, and he pours it over his face with this bucket or bowl. He pours the water over his face, and then there's like a hidden blade that he either carefully placed there before he came in or someone else did, and he grabs that blade and he's like literally starts stabbing all these like minion guys outside. And then he goes in and stabs the shit out of the leader, who again he assumes is the guy who murdered his family and who he was told to go kill. Also by Yang Do-soo. Again, we don't have all the facts. We are just going based off of Yang Do-soo's word. There was already tension there. They're assuming that he crossed the line by ordering the hit on his family, which we don't know to be confirmed yet, but these are all possibilities. And then from there, obviously Tae-goo has to go on the run, and yes, this is obvious because like obviously, or it's clear that people are going to be out for blood, especially people in connection to or in assistance or alliance to him. You know, every leader has another guy higher up who's pulling strings, or below them who's gonna try to go for revenge, whatever. This is all interconnected, dirty, under-the-counter, crazy shit going on. Some version of a mob system, and they're not all on the same turf. That's what it seems like. And yeah, so he goes on the run, but he doesn't go out of the country yet. He goes to Jeju Island, which is still in the proximity of South Korea. But it's a little more spaced out and away from, I'm assuming, the city that they're in. I don't know what part of which city they're in, but they're not in Jeju yet, but now he is. And he's planning on going to Russia in like a week. At least that's what Yang Do-soo tells him that's gonna happen. And yeah, so this sort of is like in the next part in the film, where Tae-goo is not only in Jeju, like by himself, he's staying with this like ex-mobster who's helping out because Yang Do-soo, I guess, told him that he'd give him a certain sum if he watched one of his guys for like a week. So he's staying at this like ex-mobster's house who has like a lot of acclaim, like everyone knows his name, who he is, but he hasn't done that shit in like years. Like he retired, or you can assume he's retired. And there's this young woman with him who we find out is his niece, and that's the, you know, guy with the acclaim is her uncle, which is sort of, again, ironic in that he just lost his niece, and there's sort of these same very specific dynamics right in front of him all the time. I don't know why the film, like, I feel like the film could have done anything. That could have been his daughter, it could have been a wife, it could have been so many things, but they definitely were hitting home with that in these reflections and these foreshadows. So yeah, I just think the film is, again, teaching you how to read it very specifically, and it's interesting. So he gets there, and the vibe is off, not really. Well, one, I mean, can you really trust anyone, especially when you're in sort of that field? But he ran away because he's, you know, has shit, he has baggage. And they have baggage too, and they're all in this sort of mobster way of life, or were, so they all know something's up and they know shit's tough. Even if this acclaimed guy, popular guy, is retired now, you know, he probably knows what Tae-goo's going through in some form or another. And I don't So I assume they don't know. Yeah, they don't know that Tae-goo just lost his family either, so there's that. And he doesn't seem to want to talk about it. I think it makes sense that he doesn't want to talk about it, his loss. And the woman or the niece's name is Jeon. I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's her name. And she doesn't like him already. And I think a lot of the reason why, especially when we find out later more about her, is because he is a shining example of her trauma. And in another way, they are reflecting at him in a way that keeps referencing his own trauma. And this aspect or this part of the film really starts to dig deep into the serious personal issues that these characters are going through outside of this sort of mobster and gang affiliation. It's like two separate worlds in one. Sort of how it is in general to be alive, where you have the realities of your personal life and your struggles and your mental health, and outside of whatever profession that's already probably stressful and you probably freaking hate. And except theirs is like really, really bad because of the effects of the careers that either they or their family have decided to be in. It always affects others, right? A major domino effect in this. So she's very standoffish. She doesn't want him to be there, it seems, and he finds her to be very weird. They have a few encounters at this point. I'm probably going to just go through it quickly because it's important and I really like it, but it's not that important. But so there's a moment where he wakes up to gunshots and Jeon is shooting at these like empty beer bottles, and she's a good shot, and he even notices that too. And then after she shot all the bottles, she aims the gun at herself, and she looks out towards like the ocean or the sea, which is very close to where they're at. And he's freaking out, and he's like, "Don't do it! Don't kill yourself!" And she pulls the trigger, and there's no bullet. It's an empty barrel. And he freaks out, like, what the fuck? And she sort of just gives him this blank stare and then walks off. Like, okay, great, nice meeting you too. I've met you one other time, and then this happens. Whoa, okay. And there's another instance where, again, the film is teaching you to read, and it's almost like a mirror effect going on here, because she has an illness that is in very, very bad shape. They don't say the specifics, but she sort of passes out when she's sitting in the car, and it's not turned on or anything. She's not driving, she's just parked, and he's like, what is going on? Because he just sees her out there, and then she passes out, and then the uncle comes and says, get in the car, we have to go, and they're at the hospital. And that's when Tae-goo finds out that she has some sort of illness where if the uncle doesn't get to the U.S., where there are better physicians who can save her or whatever, for some reason they have to go to the U.S., she's going to die, and very soon. And she also knows this, but she doesn't want to spend her time in like hospitals, waiting to die, and she knows that she can't get as much help in Korea as she needs. So that's why this uncle, like this retired mobster, is trying so hard to get money, and that's why he's even taken Tae-goo in, because he's trying to get money from all these avenues so that he can get to the US and get out of there, like trying to sell his house that they're currently living in. He's selling off these guns as quickly as possible. There's a scene where he's like cutting these fish apart and gun parts are coming out. Yeah, so it's like illegal under the counter shit, but like whatever. And so that happens in the film, and he gives Tae-goo sort of a briefing on what's going on, and they sort of have a bonding moment there, and he has to leave for some reason, the uncle, and Tae-goo is just like watching over Jeon, and she wakes up, she rips off her hospital gown to Tae-goo's dismay, and she puts on her normal clothes and she walks the fuck out of there, and he follows, even though he thinks she should probably stay. She does not. She does not do what she doesn't want to do. And they have this whole car scene where they're bickering and talking about how she doesn't need to give him respect because technically she's gonna die before him, so essentially she's older than him. It's a whole thing, and it's interesting dialogue, and she has a point. And she convinces him to like stop to get food, and I don't remember what the food is, but she's like, you know, this is a dish that you have to eat before you die, before you go to the grave, like it's a must. And he doesn't eat it, but he instead watches her, and she gets drunk, and she tries to get him the drink, and he takes like one tiny ass sip, and he's done. He's like, no. She even mentions like, oh, it's fine, we're in like this small town, like no one's gonna stop you. And literally right after they get in the car, we see a scene of them getting stopped by like these cops, and they're checking blood alcohol, whatever, and she's drunk off her ass, but she wasn't driving, so whatever. And that's a whole thing. Again, I think it's just a little bit of comic relief in this paced film that can be quite violent, but it didn't feel out of place. It felt fine. It felt normal. It felt realistic. Really appreciated it. And at this point, I think it's right after this, maybe there's another scene, but they get back to the house. She had like slept on the way from that checkpoint where she was drunk as hell, and they get back and she's about to wake up or whatever, and they're still in the car, and they hear gunshots, and there's all these cars parked out front, and that's when they walk into a scene that the audience has been shown, but they didn't know until they walked into the room, of her uncle literally getting shot the fuck down. I can't even count on hand how much, but it looks so painful. And for some reason, like the guys who were speaking to him or doing deals with him about guns earlier in the film are back to get those guns. That after the day that they actually made the deal, they're back to get more of the guns or whatever. But at this point, there's been a hired hit, I'm assuming, on the uncle and Tae-goo, and like no witnesses left behind or whatever, and some other shit too. But anyway, they like literally start shooting at him, and they want to take those guns, but I guess for free too. And there's like these white guys out front. I guess they're supposed to be Russian. I don't know. This part really is a little confusing. I feel like they could have made it a little more clear as to why those guys were there, but either way, it doesn't take away the moment. Clearly we know something weird is going on. And during this whole process where I've been talking about Tae-goo's perspective, he obviously hasn't been knowing that behind the scenes, what's his name? Yang Do-soo has been, selling him out pretty much. This leader that they tried to kill Tae-goo and Yang Do-soo in the beginning, and I say tried to kill because he essentially didn't end up killing the guy, but he almost did. And that leader guy that Tae-goo spoke to at the very beginning and then, went to the bathhouse with and tried to like stab to death, he lived, but he's like paralyzed or something. He's hurt. He's not the same guy that he was before, but he's not dead. And director Ma is like his underling who is out for blood, and he wants Yang Do-soo's head because he knows that he called the hit, right? And for some reason, they have some sort of meeting, and it's decided that instead of getting Yang Do-soo, which actually the reason is because Yang Do-soo has so many connections and access, and if he gets hurt, they get her. And he knows that. So he's like, fine, what's the deal then if I can't have you since you're the one who fucking pulled the trigger, right? You can have the guy who literally tried to kill him, which is Tae-goo. Which I guess it's a fair trade, but not really because he's not the one who called the hit. But, I mean, yeah, he's the one who did it, but he's not the one who actually called the hit. He was just sort of a minion, but whatever. So that's what was going on off screen the whole time that I was talking about Tae-goo. And what else? Yeah, so they're in this, like, garage storage room, and the uncle got shot like a lot, and it looks super painful. and he's like lying on the ground for some fucking how. I don't know if this is even like scientifically possible. He's still alive, but clearly he's dying and he's losing a lot of blood. And the niece runs in there, and don't get me wrong, he put up a fight before he fell, and anyone would probably have fallen a lot sooner considering how many times he was shot. But the niece runs in there after hearing the shots too, and she's like crying for her uncle because she knows that he's dying. And we also get a flashback to, I don't know if it's right at this moment, but we get a later flashback at some point, either in this moment before or after, and we see a parallel or again a flashback memory of how Jeon lost her family and why she lives with her uncle. Her uncle, again, was like this big guy in the mob before he retired, and these guys were after him, but instead they like got his family and they killed like his brother's wife, and his other niece, which was Jaeyoon's mom, dad, and sister, or like family. And she came home one day and their dead bodies were like there, and she's the one who found them. And then she ended up living with her uncle, who for the longest time she really did hate and resent, but she never like really showed it because really he's the only family she had, and now she's losing him. And it's pretty fucked up, and you see why she is the way that she is, especially about this sort of job description, this like affiliation that's been in her life for so long. And then she has like this death wish, mostly because she's already dying, so there's that. And they try to like kill her or whatever, but then Tae-goo comes in and he is, defending her and telling them like, no, you're not going to do anything to her. And then she finds some gun on the floor and starts shooting at them, and like I said before, she's a really good shot, so she gets most of the guys. And then I think one of the guys gets away, but most of them are dead, along with her uncle, and she's freaking out, and Tae-goo's like, we gotta go, like, your uncle's gone, I'm sorry, but we gotta go. So again, she's freaking out, and she's still freaking out in the car, and they end up going to like one of these small owned bed and breakfast like hotels. She knows the owners, and that's where we end up, and we will be right back for part 2 momentarily. Okay, so at this point in the film, we're back for part 2 for Night in Paradise. The situation has escalated drastically. I mean, there's been a lot of drastic moments, but it's pretty bad. Jaeyoon's uncle is dead. Jeon, I think that's how you say it. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Her uncle has been murdered brutally, and we find that Tae-goo might not really be able to trust the people that he has put his trust into. He notes at this point that he hasn't actually been able to get in contact with the guys that he works with and who have a lot of loyalty to him, which is a red flag. In fact, he's getting a lot of red flags, but for some reason he ignores them. I think he really wants to trust Young Do-soo, and I don't know if it's because he's desperate and he doesn't have family anymore, and he also is on the run at this point for killing that guy for whatever the reason. We know the reason, but it's not like that's going to matter when these other people are after him for revenge. So I'm just wondering, because the film doesn't really say or give his opinion on this, but I wonder if a part of the reason why he was ignoring the red flags is because he was so desperate, because he didn't have any other choice, or because he genuinely had so much trust in Young Do-soo. And so, yeah, it's bad. And we go through this whole thing where he's trying to lift up her spirits after losing her uncle. They go back to that restaurant. This time he actually eats with her. He tells her how he actually really loves this meal, and he used to eat it all the time because his mom used to make it, but his sister didn't like the fish or something that was in it, so it made her like want to vomit. But he always loved it, and that the dish was really good, just like she said. And they have sort of this moment where they're riding on this scooter and looking at the ocean, and they start to really build the bond that I think was already building in a playful way, but now it's like strong. there doesn't seem to be any romantic elements here, and even if there was going to be a bubbling romance, they wouldn't have time with the pacing and the runtime at this point. It's later in the film, and they just have so much going on, right? But I think in total, it didn't need that. Their friendship that they're building in this really odd, dysfunctional way works, and it's good enough for me. And I'm trying to think where we go with this. Okay, so there's like an airport scene where Yang Do-soo tells him like, hey, it's time to go, meet me at the airport, or whatever. At this point, I think he is worried about Jeon. I don't know if he was going to leave and go to Russia at that point and just leave her there, or if he was going to go speak to him and figure something out to take her with him, or if she was going to stay with the Airbnb. But at this point, none of that was going to happen anyway, because he was set up, and Yang Do-soo, like I mentioned briefly, had set a deal saying that you can have Tae-goo and not me, and that's what they did. Specifically director Ma. And they go in and they try to chase him, and literally when I talk about a chase scene, it's one of the best that I've seen. One of, not the best, but one of the best. And man, this guy literally takes on like 20 something men, and can we talk about how unfair that is? And he still manages to bruise almost every single one of them up. And they're like in this car, and he's like fighting all of them off. I don't even know. It's crazy. I don't even remember how they ended up from the airport to the car. I think he just like ran and they were following him. And I think the way that he manages to get away from them briefly is like the cops show up and the guys like disperse and he just sprints off. He's tough. Like, if you want to talk about someone who is like desperate to live and just knows how to survive, this guy, Tae-goo, is the definition of that. And he, runs off, saves himself, and it's pretty insane, this scene. But he goes back to check on Jeon, or sort of tell her, oh yeah, you were right, because before this, after he had tried to lift up her spirits and he was called, finally, after he couldn't get in contact with anyone, she did tell him that she doesn't trust what's going on. He shouldn't go to the airport. She doesn't think that it's legit. And that's why I said I think that he was shady, because there were so many red flags, and I wondered if Tae-goo knew that, or if he was just ignoring it because he was so desperate. But so yeah, he goes, and yeah, it's bad. And he goes and tries to find her, and she tells him, oh, I'm going back, to my house where my uncle died, in that storage bin or whatever. She gets back and everything's like cleared out and cleaned. Clearly someone didn't want to leave evidence. There would have been a lot of evidence, but it's cleaned out. And she ends up running into, or having a face-to-face interaction with director Ma and Yang Do-soo, and Tae-goo turns around to go back to help her because he cares, and he knows that he's pretty much walking into a death wish. They call him and pretty much threaten him with her and with his men, even though they've definitely already killed his men, I'm sure of it, but they're trying to use that as a way to be like, hey, you need to come here if you want to save your men. Like, yeah, right. And how can he even trust you at this point? You shady asshole. And so he drives back knowing damn well that he's probably not going to survive. And she even says that on the phone, because at some point they're like, here, there's this girl, talk to her, we have her, or whatever, some bullshit like that. And she's like, you're stupid for coming back here, right? Like, they're probably going to kill you in one way or another. That's pretty much what she's saying. And she also says, it'd be stupid for you to come back considering I'm literally dying. It's kind of like this dark humor, but it's, again, needed, and it doesn't feel off. And he goes back, and they essentially have like a fucking war in there between like these three men and this woman who they gravely underestimate. And I do want to note that even though she's ill and she seems standoffish, she's very powerful. She commands the screen every time she's on it. And she does have agency in a way that like demands to be felt. It's not forced. It's not unauthentic. It's not necessarily agency in a way that they tend to give women, where like, oh, she's going after this guy, or she's someone special because of the higher ups. She just is who she is entirely, and she's accepted what she sees as her fate, and she's unapologetic about it, and that's what gives her agency, which she's, again, underestimated in the film, I think, by the people who don't know her, right? They don't know what she's been through. And anyway, he goes back and pretty much gets the shit beat out of him for I don't want to say no reason. I mean, he has killed people, and he did attempt to kill Director Ma's like leader guy. But again, I think that it's pretty fucked up that he has to take full responsibility of that situation, and then the other people involved don't take any responsibility and get away with it and still have attitudes and still act like their hands are clean just because they didn't necessarily pull the trigger, and they are using people to gain more power and more money, and it's fucked up and it pisses me off. And I will say Director Ma is kind of funny. I don't think he's a good guy, and I don't think any of these guys are genuinely good, but there's like a scene where he like literally punches Yang Do-soo in the nose. I wonder if he broke it or anything, but he's just unapologetically does not like Yang Do-soo. He doesn't like to sit by him. He's like, you're a snake, you're a snitch, you're dirty, man. Like, I'm dirty, but you're like another level of trash. And it's so true. It's so true. And I think that's another thing about Director Ma. Like, he knows exactly who the fuck he is. He doesn't pretend to be anybody that he isn't. He doesn't pretend to be a god like Yang Do-soo, who literally is just trash and scum of the earth. He's just like, yeah, this is what it is. This is my profession. It's terrible. But I know that. Like, no one's gonna tell me I'm shit because I already know it. That's pretty much how he is. And yeah, so he reveals that Yang Do-soo is the one who killed Tae-goo's sister and niece, but blamed it on his gang, his mob, so that he could find a way to keep Tae-goo under his, control, and not turn over to the side that was recruiting him in the beginning, which we find out that, well, we know as an audience that he was never going to go over to their side. He didn't want to in the beginning. That's why there was so much tension. He was like, no. So essentially, Yang Do-soo did all that for no fucking reason, but it also just shows that he is all about himself to the core. Like, he is evil as hell. And Tae-goo is just he's shocked, and that's why I wondered in the beginning, like, was this desperation? Is that why he ignored all the red flags? Because this guy is no amateur. He knows what he's doing. He knows how this shit works. And I was like, he must be desperate if he's ignoring all these red signs. Maybe it's the grief, I don't know. But when he sort of had like that moment of what, like, on his face, I thought, okay, this guy really trusted him for some reason. Or maybe he just felt like he had to, I don't know, but he was shook and he was angry, and you could just see all the pain hitting him again and all the grief and everything. And at this point, he's like bloody and beaten up, and Yang Do-soo's kind of walking around talking shit for no fucking reason. Like, no one fucking likes you anyway. And Director Ma is just kind of, living in the revelation that, yeah, this guy really is shit. I wish I could kill him, but I can't, so I'm gonna kill you. That's literally what's happening. But he also promises him that he won't hurt Jeon. And unlike Yang Do-soo, even though, again, none of them are really good, he means what he says. When he makes a promise, he keeps it. And he says, I promise I won't kill her. And he doesn't. And you'll see that in the end. Even though Yang Do-soo is like, no, we should kill her because she's a liability. He's such an asshole. And the guy's like, no, I kept my promise. We are not going to kill her. What the fuck is wrong with you? Anyway, so Tae-goo does die after he savagely beats the shit out of Yang Do-soo for finding out that he's the one who essentially killed his sister and niece. And then he is brutally killed. So I don't know how else to explain it. When I say brutal, I mean, wow, graphic. So that's just something you have to see on screen. There's really no words for it, no details that I can give away because it's self-explanatory. And like I said, they go back and forth about promising whether or not they're going to keep Jeon alive, and pretty much director Ma puts his foot down like, let's fucking leave. She lives. And I think they like put gasoline everywhere and they pull her out of the room and they leave. And then we get this fucking badass final scene of this underdog, underestimated queen who has a chip on her shoulder. She has a debt she wants paid, and she drives up, I think on a scooter, to this restaurant where all those guys who killed Tae-goo or responsible in some way or another for his death are in this restaurant. They're all in there, just them, and I think like maybe the owners of the restaurant. And she goes in there, she puts her hood over her head, she locks the door, she has a gun with her, and again, she's a great shot. And they pick at her a little bit, make fun of her, ask her like what she's doing, you know, this restaurant's closed right now, whatever, being gross. And she shoots them unapologetically. She starts by shooting one of the guys in the head, and then after that it's a free-for-all. And then director Ma and Yang Do-soo come out of this like private room they were in and eating, and they're fucking shook because she took on like maybe 50 guys by herself with one gun. That's how good of a shot she is. It's crazy. There was literally no struggle. Well, obviously you could say, oh, with a gun, of course there was no struggle, but she's a good enough shot that she takes all of them down with one bullet each. That's impressive. I'm sorry, that's so impressive. I know it's so fucking violent, but that's impressive. And then Director Ma, I think he says like, I understand you have like, you know, something you want revenge or whatever. And then he dies. She shoots him and he falls through like the little slide bamboo door or whatever. It looks like it's made of like bamboo or some type of wood that's not very super sturdy, and he falls through it, and then she kills the other two guys in there, one of which who is Yang Do-soo. And the movie ends with her on the beach listening to music. In the background, you sort of hear the offset of a police siren, so clearly they're coming after her for shooting all those guys, and also all those guys are dead. So maybe an ambulance or two, and before they can get to her, she shoots herself. And then that's the end of the movie. That is Night in Paradise, released in 2020. I will list the name of the director somewhere so you can see. I strongly encourage you to watch this film. Maybe don't eat before if you can't handle that. Tell me what you think. I personally think it was worth it, and I will be putting it on my list of one of the best films I've seen this year. Thanks.